hypothetically speaking, if you're going to make a Doomfist guy, what would be the key fundamentals, however, the bits and bops and consequences that I should be included? You would need to talk about like what an engage with a Doomfist actually should look like.
No intro, straight on to the guide. Doomfist weapon, the shotgun sniper, makes Doomfist shoot 11 short-range pellets per shot, dealing a total of 66 damage per shot with a reload of 0.65 seconds alongside 4 ammo. There's not too much to Doomfist's hand cannon other than to make sure that you have at least 3 or 4 shots for when you engage, and to interweave your shots throughout your basic set of combos, which I'll elaborate on later with his other abilities. Keep in mind that your shooting animation is cancelled with any of your abilities, which may help with interweaving your shots. The other important bit of micro is trigger discipline, which is making sure that you take the extra half a second to align your crosshairs with where the enemy will travel, especially after either of your abilities. This is specifically important when fighting against heroes with awkward hitboxes such as Ana, so make sure to align and predict your crosshairs instead of spamming all 4 shots. Doomfist's first ability, the Uppercut, makes Doomfist uppercut enemies in front of him, dealing 50 damage and locking enemies into the air for 0.6 seconds, paired with a 6-second cooldown. Before getting into the uppercut specifically, the golden rule across all of Doomfist's abilities is that you ideally want to use 2 to engage and leave 1 to escape. Exceptions would be your ultimate or rollouts, which I'll elaborate on later. Unlike your slam, you'll mainly be using uppercuts for your combos. The main combo, primarily based for the uppercut instead of the slam, is to punch, shoot and shortly uppercut afterwards. This is mainly used for when you're out of the 15-meter range to use your Seismic slam to engage, so you'll use your slam to escape instead, so you don't commit all 3 abilities with no way to escape. Doomfist's second ability, the Slammy Boy, makes Doomfist leap forward, dealing up to 125 damage alongside a maximum range of 15 meters paired with a 6-second cooldown. One bit of micro is to jump prior to your Seismic Slam to squeeze out a little bit more damage. The main, most basic but important combo with Seismic Slam is the shoot, slam, shoot, uppercut combo, but aside from that, there aren't any other majorly useful combos. There is debate over whether to engage using your slam combo or whether to engage using your punch. Here's Barlow explaining why the slam combo is often better utilized to engage over your punch.
Slam really is the cooldown of choice. It does AoE damage instead of single target. It's faster damage. It sets up your uppercut combos nicely, which allow for one-shots and kills. Punch is better used as a setup or an escape than it is in an engage. You don't want a long charging punch. You want to be quick, you want to be fast, you want to be AoE, you want to set up your shoot combos, which is really the bread and butter of Doomfist, and then you want to get out of dodge.
However, there are 2 types of slams which you should know when to use. The first is the ground slam, which is slow to perform, less accurate, vulnerable to CC, but deals more damage. You'll want to do the slam against a clump or group of enemies that have either low CC, mobility, or range, so that you don't miss, get stunned, or take too much poke during your slam animation respectively. Against heroes like Moira, Brig, or McCree, you'll want to avoid the slam since they can stun you before you even land the damage. Exceptions would be when they're looking at your dive tanks who's heavily baiting attention, which should allow you to get away with the greedier slam. The second slam is the targeted slam. This is much faster to perform, as well as being more accurate and more resistant to CC abilities, but deals less damage. You'll want to do this in duels where it is harder to dodge your slam, or if you're engaging at an angle where the enemy team might poke you early, in which case a quick engage would be ideal. Circumstances where you can get away with the greedier slam without being stunned, for example, tanks baiting attention as mentioned prior, or engaging from an unorthodox angle or rollout will be beneficial. Lastly, you almost always want to use your slam to escape at an angle and not back to your team, as Barlow explains here.
A lot of the times, especially against a not very mobile composition, you do not want to be going back to your team, because not only is it more dangerous, as we see here, you're also losing a significant amount of pressure. Like, look at this, chat. What would be the best thing to do in this circumstance here? Go to health pack, get out, slam out here, go grab health pack, rinse and repeat. The point being is that you know they do not have mobility. They cannot chase you down, they cannot punish you, so you need to continue to stay on the angle. The problem here is if you punch and you slam back to your team, even if you get out alive, what do you do now? You have literally one option. You have to flank through hotel and hope that nobody sees you. So you were set up well against a composition that couldn't push you. You engage, you scuff up your engage, and then instead of setting up again, you completely bail and die.
Keep in mind that this doesn't just apply to slam, but to your punch as well if you decide to escape with that. Doomfist's third ability, the 4-second one-shot, makes Doomfist charge up his rocket punch for 1.4 seconds, dealing up to a total of 250 damage paired with a 4-second cooldown. One bit of micro is that you can prolong your punch, which can be used to wait or bait an enemy around a corner, or for you to gain a little bit more distance for a better punch angle. The most basic but important piece of tech is to jump at the end of your punch with Doomfist to conserve momentum and to travel a little bit further, not to mention that you can bunny hop at the end as well. This is solely used for mobility, to either reach your engagement angle faster, to do some of the following techs or rollouts that I'll mention later on, or to escape an engagement immediately. Before the types of punches, one massive thing for less experienced Doomfists is to know when to cancel punch. Too many Dooms try fishing for one shots when funneling down hard chokes and end up feeding heavily into the enemy team. However, you can also utilize this to bait cooldowns, with prime examples being Orisa's Fortify or Reinhardt's Pin. Speaking about funneling down main, if you are reduced to becoming a punch bot, here's Barlow explaining how you can deal more damage and simultaneously take less damage on engagement in relation to Doom's punch.
But I don't even mind punching Rein. Punching from the front, where Hanzo can shoot you, Zarya can bubble, you can be slapped. The only thing that's saving you right now is the fact that your monkey ball are baiting attention elsewhere. If you're going to punch from an angle into the wall, where they can't see you as you initiate, so you have a cleaner engage, and you actually have a wall to punch in. My point being is that when you engage from main, you're often forced to do really bad engages.
Moving on to the three main different types of punches. The first is the turn punch. This is turning your camera in the direction you want to move in during your punch animation. The use for this is to engage at an unexpected angle so you take less damage on engagement, and as a result, you're more likely to dodge CC abilities such as McCree's Flash or Arna's Sleep, since you're not on the LOS until it's too late. Keep in mind that you can combine a turn punch into one of your combos. The second type of punch is a bounce punch. This is used to gain high ground without having to use your uppercut, or to set yourself up at a good angle for a slam uppercut combo. You can also literally bounce on some balance spots on certain maps, as Get Quaked On shows here.
This is usually known as a balance spot. It's pretty much when you go on a spot and you balance yourself on there. I don't think anybody's ever named this. I personally call it a 4-second bounce, and it's pretty much when you're balancing and your character doesn't move for 4 seconds and you get a bounce. You could move your crosshair and stuff like that, but your character just has to not be able to move at the balance spot at all.
The last type of punch is the diagonal punch. Here's Karku explaining what it is and two ways in which it can be utilized.
Doomfist tech known as a diagonal punch, with a mixture of what we call kill spots, where the punch connects on an enemy against a wall, or a setup spot where you'd initiate with the punch to get some height before following up with the Seismic or Uppercut.
Here are some of the most practical diagonal punches I got from the video condensed.
Start here on the left side, charge your punch against this slanted wall and watch the enemy snipers tilt. On Volskaya, this diag is a setup punch off the forklift on attack, which can clear both sides of the defending high ground if you follow up with the Seismic. The right side is straightforward, but to make it to the left side you also need to turn punch, which makes this quite a complicated tech. Hollywood first for attack, stay out of line of sight to the right to begin. Diag punch off this car to kill any enemies hanging out on the balcony, or to set yourself up for Seismic Slam combo on high ground back here. This diag punch is pretty good because you begin in cover relative to the common defending spot on this bridge. Aim it off the slanted rock and you'll likely connect on an enemy up here. Beginner diag would be going over towards the enemy high ground and Seismic comboing them. Nice and easy. The intermediate level is going up to the central building, then hitting the enemy with a 100 plus Seismic on the ground or high ground. Or head towards the main choke and Seismic off this tiny blue curve for some big damage.
Like to the turn punch, this is used to reduce damage taken on engagement as you are unscouted, and in a dive comp you can split focus by coming from an unorthodox angle. The last thing to do with Doom's punches are rollouts. Here's Barlow explaining the importance of rollouts, which does carry over to the three prior types of punches.
The reason why rollouts with Doomfist are important is because it allows you to engage without being scouted and without the enemy team stopping you. That's why rollouts are important a lot of times with Doomfist, is because it's either sneaky or hey, we can't stop him from doing that, that was too fast, or he's too far away, or whatever. Because if you walk down on a right chunk, just chunk, 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 everybody knows you're there, everybody can stop you.
I highly recommend my own or Bandito set of rollouts per map, linked in the top right or in the description respectively. Doomfist's ultimate, the Terry Crew special, makes Doomfist crash into the ground, dealing up to 300 damage in the inner ring and up to 200 damage in the outer ring, alongside an increased movement speed of 16.5 meters per second, lasting for 4 seconds. Holding right click, L2 or LT on console will enable a bird's eye view of the impact zone, which can be used to climb up on platforms. There are three primary uses of Meteor Strike. First is to obviously combo it with other abilities such as Halt or Grav to land massive AoE damage. For higher levels, these combos would be performed on rotations where there are often kill boxes where the enemy backline is vulnerable. The second is the barrel and cycle aggression. Essentially, you can use the 4-second duration as well as the cast time to regenerate your cooldowns so that you can continue your engagement. You can also use all 3 of your cooldowns to engage more aggressively and across larger distances, using your Meteor strike to either escape or to continue your aggression depending upon how successful your engagement was. The third is to use it as a positioning tool, as Chipser briefly explains here.
Oftentimes on Doomfist, it's better to use your ult to get position rather than to do damage. Instead of landing on an enemy, you can try and ult onto like a building, a high ground, something like that, wait for your cooldowns to come back, and then go back in with your standard combo. This is oftentimes stronger because a lot of people don't think that you're going to do it. It's a very unexpected move, and it'll catch a lot of people off guard.
Moving on to the last section of the guide, positioning, playstyle and timing. Here Spal is showing an example of good timing from a Doomfist coachee. Pay attention to the turn punch and angles taken as well as the good timing.
Nice. I don't know that I would have committed my punch to here, but again, committing from the angle, and when are you doing it? Chat, when is he doing it? You see the timing here? Like, we're gonna give credit when credit is due. It's not perfect, but it's there. Look at this. Brilliant. Concave push on an angle. You take no damage on entry because you push quickly and off split from main, and you engage it on a right when your tanks are going in.
Dealing with flankers who can out-duel you and take your space, such as Tracer, Echo or D.Va, are often hard to deal with. Here's Spal explaining why and also how to counteract this.
If I'm Doomfist and I punch out of a choke often to a flank, well then now that Tracer can just immediately say, oh, hi Doomfist, I'm gonna go duel you. And you don't have punch. And we already talked about how Doomfist isn't very good one-on-one against those heroes with or without his cooldowns. So not only is Doomfist bad against Tracer, he had to use punch to set up just to get poked out by a Tracer anyway. So like as Doomfist, what do you do about that? Number one, obviously adjusting your playstyle against enemy compositions and taking less greedy flanks. Like you can't hard flank, like go all the way behind the enemy team if they're playing like Tracer Sombra. That's not likely to work very well. So a lot of time you kind of have to time your splits really well, and you have to try and avoid running into the Tracer aggro. Like play in angles and short angles that aren't completely isolated. So in other words, like taking a little bit off, right? And then engage from here, or a little bit off from here. Or maybe go high ground, right? Because Tracer doesn't have as good high ground mobility as you.
Another thing important to note is that in a dive composition, you don't need all 6 heroes diving backline, but rather, you as Doomfist can utilize the CC from your abilities to prevent any peeling or counter dive from the enemy team, as our coach John Galt explains here.
So generally what happens is the Winston and the D.Va and the Lucio and the Genji goes in, the Doomfist disrupts the people from going up. So they disrupt the Xayah, they punch the Xayah, they high uppercut the Rhine, blah blah blah. Let's say you send all 6 people just feeding into the backline, you might be able to kill the NR, but all these 5 people are going to be able to kill you because you have put yourself in a position where you're in the middle of the enemy and you're just going to die. So you kill the NR, but you're going to sacrifice all 6 people. So the reason why Doha doesn't go in is because he knows that it's the concept, but you can't go everyone go in. So a lot of time a dive would take place with 2 to 4 people, and then the other 2 people like the NR, the Lucio maybe, the Doomfist is playing a different position, doing something else rather than just diving the NR. It's not just 6 people jumping a target, it's some people jumping a target, some people doing something else to support that dive or to set up a different threat or to make sure that the jump survives and succeeds. So you have the divers and you have the enablers as well.
In Hackfist, here's Jayne explaining some of the nuances and wider level macro you can implement as a team with respect to Doomfist.
D.Va is to Winston as Winston is to Doomfist, in that a Winston jumping in is going to get cleave, he's going to drop his bubble, and he's also going to attract a lot of attention, and a Brigitte is more likely to use the stun on the Winston. And this creates a lot of opportunities for the Doomfist to actually go in and not get focused. Doomfist can never be going in alone. A Doomfist to be most effective has to stage in a singular location and attack in basically a kill box, and you as Sombra is going to be the one who's actually scouting that information and triggering the dive itself. Have your Winston come in, drawing the attention and the cooldowns. And then this also goes into like ways that you can make the dive more effective if you have things like Primal. Is if your Winston goes in primals, the purpose of the Primal here doesn't become to attack, but you can split. For example, you can just punch a Reinhardt or tank further into no man's land where Sombra and Doomfist can fuck them up, or you can just split front and backline and allow the Sombra and the Doomfist to do like a 2-man isolation on the backline.
Lastly, I'll explain a basic Doomfist strat when playing him in Brawl. Firstly, in Brawl, you'll almost always need a Zarya to bubble the Doomfist. This means that you can go for a greedier slam onto the backline without getting stunned. This will force the enemy team to back up, and your Mei should land an easy wall to either split the enemy team or to prevent their route of retreat. This will give your team 3 angles of threat, 1 from the Doomfist, 1 from the core, and 1 from the Mei. This will split focus, which will allow for an easy blizzard if you so desire. Well, that's it for the guide, but just before I end off the video, shout out to my now former team Holsum. We unfortunately didn't get very far in playoffs, but it was definitely the first team that was simultaneously above average at the game, but also had a solid mentality as well, which is a rarity for most teams. Not to mention that the captain on Holsum, Michaels, was a lot more tolerable than the one on Dystopia. Anyways, much love to everyone that was on Holsum, and aside from that, if you enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and if this video also helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Stay tuned for my following May guide, and until next time.
Nobody gon' ruin me. I just call my wife up, let's get Hoover free. I put all my ice up in my Louis V. I just caught my mama crib.